On Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, a fire consumed the home of the Sodder family. In the chaos and the smoke, George and Jenny Sodder, along with 4 of their children, managed to escape the inferno. But 5 others did not. The official story is that they perished in the blaze. Their bodies turned to ash. But this isn't a simple story of a tragic accident. It's a story of impossible clues, of disturbing threats, and a lifelong search for 5 children who, according to all evidence, simply vanished from a burning house. Before we open those doors together, hope you've been sleeping okay lately. It really matters. And if you're still with me, maybe hit like and subscribe. We're only getting started. The Sodder family was a pillar of their community. George, an Italian immigrant who arrived in America at age 13, had built a successful trucking company from the ground up. He and his wife Jenny were respected, if not always understood. George was known for his strong opinions, particularly his vocal criticism of Italy's dictator, Benito Mussolini, a stance that earned him some enemies in the tight-knit Italian immigrant community. But at home, they were simply a large, boisterous, and loving family with 10 children. Christmas Eve of 1945 began with joyful, ordinary chaos. The older children, Marion, Maurice, Martha, Louis, and Jenny, were allowed to stay up late, playing with new toys that Marion had bought for them with her earnings from a local dime store. Around 10 p.m., their mother Jenny told the younger ones, Maurice 14, Martha 12, Louis 9, Jenny 8, and Betty 5, that it was time for bed. They begged to stay up a little longer. Exhausted, Jenny relented, reminding them to shut off the lights and lock the doors before they went up to their attic bedroom. She then took their youngest, 2-year-old Sylvia, and went to bed herself. Just after midnight, the phone rang. Jenny awoke and went downstairs to answer it. On the other end, a woman she didn't know asked for a name she didn't recognize. Jenny told the caller she had the wrong number and heard the sound of laughter and clinking glasses in the background before the woman hung up. Returning to bed, Jenny noticed something odd. The lights were still on downstairs and the front door was unlocked. She assumed the kids, in their excitement, had forgotten. She shut everything off and went back to sleep, dismissing the strange call as a simple mistake. Only an hour later at 1 a.m., she was woken again, this time by a loud thud on the roof, followed by the sound of something rolling down. She heard nothing else and fell back asleep. Just 30 minutes later, at 1:30 a.m., the house was filled with the thick, acrid smell of smoke. Jenny's bedroom was on fire. She woke George and they began screaming for their children. They grabbed Sylvia and escaped, along with their older sons John and George Jr., and their daughter Marion, who had all been sleeping on the ground floor. From the frozen lawn, they screamed up towards the attic windows, into the roaring flames, for the other 5 children. They received no response. The silence from the attic was absolute. Panic set in. Their first thought was the ladder. George always kept a heavy wooden ladder propped against the side of the house. It was always there. He ran to the spot, but it was gone. Vanished. In the frantic darkness, they searched for it, but it was nowhere to be found. Next, George decided to pull one of his 2 coal trucks up to the house and climb on top to reach the attic window. He ran to the trucks, both of which had been working perfectly the day before. He turned the key in the first one. Nothing. The engine wouldn't turn over. He tried the second truck. Again, nothing. Both vehicles were inexplicably dead. Their options were disappearing as fast as the house was being consumed by flames. Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the Fayetteville Fire Department. The neighbor's phone was dead. They tried another. The line was dead. The operator couldn't be reached. A passerby saw the blaze and drove into town to find the fire chief, F.J. Morris, but even then, the response was shockingly slow. Despite the fire station being only 2.5 miles away, the fire department did not arrive until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire had started. By then, the Sodder home was nothing but a smoldering pile of ash and charred timber in the basement. The 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were gone. The official ruling came swiftly. The fire was deemed accidental, caused by faulty wiring. and the 5 missing children were declared legally dead. But for George and Jenny, this explanation was impossible. If the fire was from the wiring, why were the Christmas lights still on when Jenny had woken up from the first phone call? And most importantly, if their children had burned in the fire, where were their remains? An employee at a local crematorium informed George that bones remain even after bodies are burned at 2,000 degrees for over 2 hours. The Sodder house fire had lasted for less than an hour before collapsing. There should have been 5 skeletons in the basement. The family began their own search, sifting carefully through the ashes. They found a few small objects, coins, a dictionary, and some appliance fragments. They found no bones, no teeth, no trace of human remains whatsoever. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, suggested the fire had been hot enough to completely cremate the bodies. This contradicted what the cremation expert had told them. The mystery deepened when Morris claimed to have found a heart in the ashes. He secretly buried it in a metal box. Weeks later, under pressure from George, he showed them where he buried it. The heart was beef liver, untouched by the fire. It became clear to the Sodders that this was not just a tragedy, but a cover-up. As the family pushed for answers, a disturbing pattern of strange events leading up to the fire began to emerge. A few months prior, a stranger had come to the house looking for work. He walked to the back of the house and pointed at the 2 fuse boxes, saying, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George had found this odd, as he had just had the wiring checked and was told it was perfectly safe. Around the same time, an insurance salesman tried to sell George a policy. When George declined, the salesman became enraged. "Your goddamn house is going to go up in smoke," he threatened, "and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." Just a few weeks before Christmas, the older Sodder sons noticed a man parked in a car along the main highway, intently watching the younger children as they walked home from school. The pieces began to fit into a terrifying puzzle. This wasn't an accident. This was an attack. The family now believed their children hadn't died in the fire at all. They had been kidnapped. The fire was just a diversion. The cut phone line, the dead trucks, the missing ladder. It was all part of a plan. Fueled by this conviction, George and Jenny devoted their lives to the search. They hired a private investigator from Washington, D.C., a man named C.C. Tinsley. Tinsley uncovered more strange facts. The missing ladder wasn't just misplaced. It was found at the bottom of a 75-foot embankment, over 100 feet away from the house. He also learned that the man who had threatened George, the insurance salesman, had served on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. Sightings began to trickle in. A woman who ran a tourist court between Fayetteville and Charleston claimed she saw the children the morning after the fire. She said they arrived around dawn in a car with Florida license plates, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women of Italian descent. "I do not remember the exact date," she said, "but the children were accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all of Italian extraction. They registered in the motel and stayed in a large room. I tried to talk to the children, but the men appeared hostile and wouldn't allow it." Another woman, working at a hotel in Charleston, said she saw 4 of the 5 children about a week later. She said, "The children were with 2 women and 2 men. I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates parked at the hotel." The family never gave up hope. In 1952, they erected a large billboard on Route 16, overlooking the site of their former home. It featured the portraits of their 5 missing children and a plea for information, offering a $5,000 reward, which they later doubled. The billboard became a local landmark, a stark and constant reminder of the unsolved mystery and a family's unending grief. It would stand for nearly 40 years. Years turned into decades. George and Jenny followed every lead, traveling across the country to investigate sightings, but each one led to a dead end. George passed away in 1968, a man broken by a mystery he could never solve. But just before he died, one final cryptic clue arrived. Jenny received a letter in the mail, postmarked in Kentucky, with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his late 20s. He bore a striking resemblance to her son Louis, who would have been that age. On the back of the photo, a strange handwritten message read, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Ill boys, a 90,132 or 35. The family hired another private detective to investigate the letter's origin, but he took their money and was never heard from again. The billboard was finally taken down in 1989, the year Jenny Sodder died. The surviving children and their descendants continued the search, but the trail had long gone cold. The fire, the missing children, and the strange photograph remain one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. The fire on Christmas Eve was real. The loss was real. But what happened to Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder remains a ghost story, whispered in the hills of West Virginia. Was it a tragic accident covered by incompetence, or a meticulously planned kidnapping executed with chilling precision? After nearly 80 years, the silence is the only answer we have. The 5 children were officially declared dead, but for those who look at the evidence, they simply vanished into the smoke. Thank you for listening. Please share this story to keep their memory alive.